Hello, friends. Welcome back to Heartscapes, where we are practicing the system of Reiki for self-development, emotional resilience, and spiritual depth. My name is Michaela, and I'm so glad to have you back with me today on what, in my home state of California, is known as Indigenous Peoples Day. A few years ago, the state of California made the choice to change the holiday, formerly known as Columbus Day, to Indigenous Peoples Day. This was a small but important moment of making a choice to shift our attention away from celebrating and acknowledging the name of the person and people who colonized this land and brought much devastation and difficulty and theft in their wake to the indigenous people of this land, and instead focus our attention on the real history, the true history of the people of this land and their modern day lives, to take one more small step in the direction of wrestling with and attempting to reconcile and somehow integrate this really complicated and challenging history. I was reflecting on this today as I was in conversation with two of my colleagues, Bronwyn Logan and Carrie Varela, who the three of us co-host the Reiki Women podcast. And on our episode today, we were talking about the fourth precept of the system of Reiki, which is just for today, be true to your way. And it came up for me in that conversation, the ways in which being true to our own way personally can open us up to being more true to our way collectively. And it felt like the shift from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day was one small example of that. And I wanted to just share that, unpack that a little bit with you all today. So firstly, just really briefly, what do we mean in the system of Reiki when we say, just for today, be true to your way? Well, this is the fourth precept, which is translated in a variety of ways. In the podcast episode, we went through a little bit of the translation from the Japanese to the English, why certain phrasing has been translated, and why we often use both just for today I am diligent or just for today I am true to my way as the translation for this precept. I'll drop a link to that episode down below if you want to hear the full conversation about that. We went in a lot of different directions. We shared a lot of different insights about how we've brought this precept into our daily life. It's a great conversation, so I invite you to check it out. But in essence, when we're looking at being true to our way and doing this diligently, day by day, moment by moment, what we're talking about is aligning ourselves with the choices, the decisions, the behaviors, the belief systems that are going to be most true to embodying the rest of the precepts, which means being unattached to fear or anger, being deeply, profoundly grateful for our life and for what is present and existing in our life, being compassionate to ourselves and to others, and above all, feeling and remembering in an embodied way, in a visceral way, the truth of our deep interconnection between our life as an individual sovereign person and all of the rest of the life around us, the people, the plants, the animals, even the inanimate objects, to really move towards living as if we truly are connected to each other, both in our material lives and on the deeper levels. And so moment by moment, day by day, we're making choices about how to proceed in our life, how to make decisions about what to do, how to behave in certain circumstances, how to approach challenging and difficult situations. And there's always a version of those choices that is going to be more true to who we truly are at our core, our whole and complete and interconnected self, which is unattached to anger, unattached to fear, grateful, and compassionate to ourselves and to others. And we talked a lot about that in the episode, both from the kind of mystical levels, the connection to mysticism traditions in Japan and other places. And then we brought that down to the logistical. What does that look like in our daily life to make choices that bring us into alignment with what is true to ourselves? Just wanted to share a quick example of what that's looked like recently in my life. and to invite us to think about the ways in which being more aligned with our true self in small day-to-day actions and decisions can add up over time to being more true to ourselves and our connections to the web of life. Because when we're truly true to ourselves, we are also true to the life around us. That those small choices add up to much bigger and more complex choices that bring us into alignment, and can expand from being true to myself as an individual to helping my family, my community, maybe even my state, my nation, the world, to be more true to a full, whole, complete, compassionate, grateful, unattached to fear and anger version of ourselves. So just a quick example of that. This past weekend, I was at a Reiki retreat with my Reiki teacher and with a small group of people that many of whom I've practiced with for years and I really care about and like spending time with. And it was a long 4 days, really wonderful, really intense, really challenging for an introvert like myself to stay connected, to stay energized when away from home in a concentrated situation with a lot of people. I mean, it was a lot of people relative to my day-to-day. I'm usually just me and my kiddo and maybe a couple other people. But this was, about a dozen of us, living together and working together pretty closely for 4 days. And as an introvert, by the end of the day, I was exhausted from all of the social interaction, to be perfectly honest. And naturally, when we get through a day of socializing, a day of, doing our work, being in this pretty intense practice session all day, that people wanted to socialize with each other and relax and, hang out, get to know each other more. And I did want to do that. I wanted to do some of that, and I did do some of that. But there was a certain point when I just was exhausted, and what I really needed was to curl up on the couch with a book, by myself or with other quiet people and sit by the fire and just be quiet and rest. That this is something that I absolutely needed, and to be true to myself and my own body, my own mind, my own emotions meant turning down the invitation to go off site and go have some drinks and listen to music. But there's another part of me, the part of me that I'm always working on in my practice, that I've worked on in therapy, that I've worked on, for quite some time to really heal old wounds around belonging and around feeling left out, feeling abandoned. And so there's many, many, many times in my past when a situation like this arises where I really, truly am done socializing and need to recharge and be alone. But there's an invitation or an opportunity, and that part of myself that doesn't want to be left behind, doesn't want to be abandoned, just can't say no, because to say no would be to, agree to my own abandonment from that point of view. So many times I've gone ahead and done things that I didn't want to do that really cost me a lot of energy, and that caused me to, ultimately not be that great of a person to hang out with. You get overtaxed and exhausted. I can become sarcastic and snappy and withdrawn and, just not really in the spirit of what we're doing. And so, in this instance on the retreat, it actually felt really easy to say no and to be true to myself, be true to my way, and to take that time to recharge and to be quiet. And I really appreciated noticing that, because, as I said, there's been many times in the past when I have been unable to make that choice to be true to myself in that kind of a situation. And it absolutely was the right decision. It really allowed me to stay connected to the group and to what we were doing, and to take care of them, right? To be compassionate to myself for what I needed, and to be compassionate towards them, who didn't need to be hanging out with somebody who was resentful of, being out in the world when I didn't want to be. So that's a, small daily choice, that, ultimately is not that big of a deal. But when we add up those experiences of choosing to be true to ourselves and feeling the impact of that, feeling the greater sense of resilience, the greater sense of depth, the greater sense of ultimately connection with people, paradoxically, because I can stay in my best self. That's the form of self-development and emotional resilience and spiritual depth that the system of Reiki has brought to me. And it makes me a better person. It makes me make better choices in my life and out in the world. And so as I was reflecting on that experience and on what it really means to be true to our way, and that this is not about selfishness, right? One of, I think it was Bronwyn brought up the point that, being true to your way is not about being self-centered. It's not about doing whatever you want. It's not about only getting your own way and not paying attention to other people's way. It's not any of that. It's doing the difficult work to discerning which choice here is going to align me with my values, is going to align me with the rest of the precepts. Which choice is going to be compassionate to myself and to people around me? Which choice is going to be unattached to fear, unattached to anger, unattached to worries and frustrations? And when we make choices like that, it impacts the people around us in positive ways. And when we do that as individuals, we can do that as communities. And so thinking about today, Indigenous Peoples Day, this was a choice that we as a community of the state of California, certainly not unanimously. This was not something that everybody in the state agreed with, but as an energy, as a groundswell, you could say, there is this choice point. Right? Do we continue doing what we've always done, which is to celebrate the name of a person who, historically speaking, like from the historic record, was a really awful person and caused great damage and destruction to the people of this land? Do we want to continue heroizing this person? Do we want to continue in the mythology of our country that upholds the founding of this country as something benign, benevolent, God-led, from some perspectives, universally positive action of settling and colonizing this country, this land that would eventually become the country of the United States of America? Do we want to continue doing that, turning away from actual documented history? Or do we want to make the more difficult choice and look at that history, be honest about that history, develop the fortification and the strong foundation in ourselves individually and collectively to be able to look at that history, be honest about it, take responsibility for it, and ask the difficult questions of what is our responsibility now in 2022, 2016 or 17, I want to say, maybe 15. Gosh, I should have that date. It's when this change was made. It wasn't that long ago. Do we want to make that more difficult choice? And I'm proud to say that California made that choice. Choosing to acknowledge Indigenous Peoples Day over Columbus Day does not rectify the history that has happened. It does not amount to reparations for hundreds of years of land theft and genocide and colonization. It is a small, tiny change in the direction of those types of reparations. And when we're talking about making changes around things that are truly difficult and that cause us deep discomfort and pain, whether that's personal in our own life or collectively, we often need to make those changes step at a time, day by day, right? Just for today, what does it mean to be true to certain values of this country, right? Our nation has a lot of different values that we put forward as what matters to us and that we aspire to. And some of those values get more weight and more precedent than others. For example, individualism, being able to be a self-made person. Those sorts of values get often put very far forward. But values like telling the truth, like being in integrity, like, being honest with ourselves. Those types of values don't always get to come to the forefront. And it requires fortification. It requires us to build a strong foundation emotionally, mentally. It requires us to have a lot of knowledge and information. It requires us to be willing to have difficult conversations, privately and publicly in this case, and to look at some hard truths and to admit that we don't have a perfect answer. We don't necessarily know what to do, but we're willing to ask the questions, and we're willing to listen to the people who have been harmed by this history, to see what feels to them like repair. And Indigenous Peoples Day gives us a container to do that. It gives us a space to ask those questions. It gives us a space to be honest. It gives us a space to celebrate histories that have been overlooked and trampled on for a very long time. It's not enough, right? But it is an example of being true to our way as a nation with regard to certain values that I hold dear and that many of us do. And it allows us, just for today, to make that small change, to notice that it feels good, to notice that it didn't break the country, it didn't break the state of California to change our holiday from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. We survived it. A lot of people were mad about it, probably still are, but we survived it. And therefore, we could make the next change. We could do maybe the harder thing. We could start asking ourselves question, what does it mean to give land back? What does it mean to be in greater integrity, amongst the peoples who now live on this land with the peoples who have been here for much longer than we have? And these are worthy and important, essential questions that ripple into impacting all aspects of our life. It allows us, asking those kinds of questions, being in that sort of spacious, curious, willing to be uncomfortable place, allows us to do things like turning over certain land management to Indigenous groups that actually have a wealth of knowledge about how to manage the land of California in ways that are much more ecologically responsible than the ways that Euro-American culture has been doing it. We can release some control over certain processes and lands that have been mismanaged, right? And we can give that control back to people who have much better grounding on how to do that well. Just one example. For myself, here at Heartscapes, I've long been in the question of what does it mean to be in integrity in this way? And I've taken tiny steps. But still in the question of what does it mean to look beyond land acknowledgements? What does it mean to look beyond statements like this video, and to, truly allow my work and my life and this tiny little piece of land that I get to do this work on, how to leverage those things in a way that moves in the direction of integrity, that moves in the direction of repair, that's true to my way and to my values, in a way that goes beyond my own life. I'm still in those questions, and always I'm grateful for moments when I can see actions that I can take. There was a online class that was released this week through the organization Speak Out, that's called, I believe, Moving Beyond the Land Acknowledgement. And it's speaking specifically to this question of what can we, as white colonizer complected folks here in the United States, how can we, because we have chosen to pause and hold a space to ask these questions, because we have chosen to look at the truth, to look at history, and to deal with the discomfort of that, and to ask the question, what can I do to be in greater integrity? Because we have chosen to ask those questions and we've making those steps to be more true to ourselves in those regards. Now, what can we do? What is the next step? Just for today, what is the next right thing to do on this trajectory towards reparation? And I've just purchased that class. I really look forward to working through it. I feel really inspired by some of the conversations I've had around it already. I'm going to put the link to that class down below in the notes in case any of you are interested in following that conversation. Again, moving beyond the land acknowledgement. Once we have chosen to acknowledge the reality of the situation, now what can we do about it? And it can feel really despairing when we've made an acknowledgement of something that we've previously been either unaware of or unwilling to acknowledge because it's so painful and difficult and confusing. I don't know what to do about that situation as an individual in my individual life. It can be really disheartening, overwhelming. It can shut us down when we don't feel like there's a next right thing to do. So I'm really grateful for this course for outlining some next right things. And I look forward to working through it. I'll share that link with you down below. And so I think that's it. I just wanted to jump on here and share a little bit of the insights around the 4th Reiki Precept just for today. Be true to your way in the context of Indigenous Peoples Day, in the context of recent things going on in my life, and to invite you to reflect on these questions as well. Firstly, from the personal, in your life, when was a moment when you made a choice that was truly true to your way, that allowed you to be in alignment with your values, allowed you to be unattached to your fear, to your anger, to be more compassionate for yourself and for others, to be more grateful? Think about a time when you made a choice that was like that. Or perhaps times when you felt challenged by that, when you maybe didn't make that choice. Not to hold that in judgment, but to just reflect on where these choice points have been in our life. And then if you feel ready, I invite you to expand that into your community, into the world around you. Where can we as a collective make choices that are more true to who we really want to be, who we truly are at our core, whole, complete, interconnected with the life, the people, the land, the plants, the animals, the atmosphere all around us? How can we make those choices just for today, small choice by small choice? Because that's how change gets made. That's how a giant ship changes course, 1 degree at a time, one choice at a time. So happy Indigenous Peoples Day. I celebrate that opportunity that we all have today, and I invite you into it. I invite you to share down below in the comments your insights, your questions, your reflections on any of this. If there's things that you've decided that have helped you to feel more integrity around these questions, I would love to hear them. I'd love to be inspired by them, and I'd love to be in conversation with you. And as you walk on that challenging, beautiful, very worthy path of acknowledgement and action in the direction of justice, may you be deeply provisioned for that journey. Thanks so much for joining me. Until next time, I love you. Goodbye.